Thanks for coming back. Again, my name is Genevieve Lister. I'm the State Public Affairs Officer for Maryland NRCS. I have a couple brief presentations to share with you today that kind of build off of what we talked about last week in terms of outreach and reaching historically underserved and a variety of audiences. So last week we discussed outreach and how we can target our outreach to reach specific audiences, including historically underserved groups. Today we'll discuss the tools and resources we can use to communicate with these audiences. And then I just want to note that later in the training, I believe our area resource conservationists have a presentation that really focuses on communicating with landowners in the conservation planning and implementation process. This presentation focuses more on communicating and reaching a broader audience. So we'll start out with a quote from Aldo Leopold. He says, "A language is imperative, for if we are to guide land use, we must talk sense to farmer and economist, pioneer and poet, stockman and philosopher, lumberjack and geographer, engineer and historian." And he wrote this probably more than 100 years ago, but I think it kind of applies to today's, what we're talking about today. You know, he really felt that in order to be a leader in science and conservation, you had to take responsibility for communication and be sure that you could speak the languages of a variety of audiences. All right, so just quick review of the questions we should ask when undertaking outreach. Last week we covered defining our audience, finding our purpose and goal of our outreach, and understanding barriers various audience may experience when working with us or trying to participate in our outreach events. Today we'll discuss determining your message and then talk about the many tactics that are available for delivering your message. So what is the message? When you're thinking about targeting a specific audience and delivering information to them, you'll want to come up with a couple key messages related to that information. These messages should be short and simple. They're the main points of information you want your audience to hear, understand, and remember. So a couple questions to ask to get you some good strategic key messages would be, what's in it for the audience? You know, you want to communicate, why should they care? You want to sell the benefits rather than the features of a program or practice to the target audience. So, you know, really answer what's in it for me. You also want to ask, what do they need to know if all else is forgotten? You know, this is the headline. These key messages are the headlines. It's the big takeaway. Key messages are actionable. So, you know, when you're speaking with your audience, what actions do you want them to take? And then finally, you want to ask, what do they already know? And depending on the audience, you want to adjust the language you're using and the depth of information you're providing. So, you know, communicating with a group of farmers at a outreach field day is going to be a lot different than communicating with the general public if you're talking about a conservation practice, for example. So here are some examples of key messages that we've had here with NRCS. We have the Unlock the Secrets of the Soil campaign, and the key messages developed for that were healthy soils are full of life, healthy soils are high in organic matter, healthy soils are well structured, and healthy soils are covered all the time. And you can really see when they developed materials related to that for public use, whether it was a fact sheet on building organic matter, or you know, a video about the benefits of cover crops. They really came back to this key message of healthy soils are. Another key messages don't have to be, this is almost bordering like a slogan or a tagline. Key messages don't need to be that. You know, they don't even need to be the exact language you plan to use on your fact sheet or in your communication. They just need to be simple. You want you want to avoid complex terms. You want to resist the urge to overload your audience with information. In key messages, you're going to leave out technical terms and acronyms. So here, the other example is when the 2018 Farm Bill rolled out, plan for communicating that here in Maryland. And you'll see it has a number of key messages, and they're not necessarily, you know, what was written in material we provided on the 2018 Farm Bill or in presentations we gave, but we did make sure that all those materials related back to these key points. All right, so you have your messages determined, then you move on to the tactics that you want to use. And tactics are the tools you would use to pursue the objectives associated with your communication strategies. So that can include email, newspapers, and social media, or like content such as articles or infographics. So, you know, here we have, you can see this is a long list. There's a lot more that could be added to that. I included some of the things we use most often, or that I see used most often, I guess, here in Maryland. So, you know, when you're choosing your tactic, it's important to remember that everyone absorbs information differently. A lot of times you're going to use more than one tactic when you're communicating a certain concept. And I think we have some examples of that coming up. So here are some tactic examples. So you can see here, again, related to soil health, venture into Maryland's healthy soils. This was started with a series of videos, but then from the videos, Twitter content was developed to get audiences to view the videos. Articles were developed. The videos were short success stories of various farmers around the state who are trying new things in soil health, exploring soil health. And so the articles then were kind of the written companion piece to those videos. The videos were also used as presentations at partner events to show, you know, the latest from Maryland NRCS, what we're working on, and to kind of explain the soil health concept to people. The next example of a tactic was for the EQIP locally led kickoff. That the main tactic was an event where farmers were invited from a specific community to come and hear about the new EQIP locally led process and funding that was available to producers in that county to treat the resource concerns they felt were most needed. So that again started with an event with a presentation, but a news release also followed along with that to talk about what the event was, and also explain a little more to people who weren't at the event what that EQIP locally led process was going to be. Another tactic example is equine outreach. A current example, so we have some staff attending the Mid-Atlantic Horse Expo. They're crossing up to Pennsylvania to do that. They'll be bringing fact sheets and a display with them. This was seen as an opportunity to target, the broader equine audience that isn't always easy to get in the same room. So there was a need there, and they found a good way to kind of reach that audience broadly at the expo. And then the final tactic example I have is an exhibit at the Piscataway Powwow in Southern Maryland. NRCS was invited by the Cedarville Band of Piscataway Indians to attend the powwow. So this was an event. The goal was to reach more Native American producers, but also general public as well. The powwow is well attended by people in the community. So the tactics that were chosen were an exhibit to draw attention, but also there, hopefully you can see it, we had some kind of fun, kid-friendly items there too. That we had what we call a prize wheel, which you'd spin and have to answer a question about one of our the 7 resources we talk about in SWAPA, and then if you got it right, I think you got a little piece of candy or something like that, and that was a big draw. And then also we had fact sheets for people to take away so they knew how to get more information about NRCS if they needed to or wanted to. So, you can see here repurposing content. That happens a lot in the public affairs world, and certainly that's available to our field staff when attending outreach events as well. The multiple tactics to communicate one idea is really important. They say, I think people have to hear something 7 times before they're really, aware of what was said. And then briefly, tactics that work towards inclusion. So, when you have a diverse audience, you want to make sure you're choosing the outlets and communicating in the ways that can be most inclusive towards everyone. So some tips are, you can participate in the activities and celebrations of cultural groups instead of only inviting people to come to your office or event. So that Piscataway Powwow is a good example of that. You can do a little research and find your target audience's preferred publications or media. So if you're, if you're targeting beginner farmers, you might consider social media as a tactic. You can sponsor culturally specific community events. You can display flyers in cultural groups' community gathering spaces. And then, of course, provide language translations for publications or events, which we touched on last week. So it's important to note here that working with partners is a great way to work towards inclusion. A lot of times they understand the needs of the audiences we want to reach. The extension has done some great programs for plain sect communities. as well as women farmers. Um, and then also, if you can get partners on board, it just adds more. It adds more material. It adds more kind of stakeholders to the conversation. And in the end, your messages will be better and your tactics will be better informed. So next, we're going to move on to some of the do's and don'ts of communicating with the public, as well as kind of how you come up with the content for these key messages.